But right now, on the end of the phone, we should have... we've got Philip Paris. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
You've got a book coming out, haven't you, about Orkney's Italian chapel, The True Story of an Icon.
That's right, yes. I don't know if people know the story of the chapel, but it is really one of the most inspiring to come out of the Second World War. The chapel was built by Italian prisoners of war sent to Orkney, captured in the North African campaigns, and shipped all the way to Orkney to help work on the Churchill barriers.
They must have found that a bit of a difference in climate, really, didn't they?
Yes, I think they probably felt they'd gone to another planet because they swapped the heat of a North African desert for a fierce Orkney winter. They arrived at the beginning of 1942 and were put into two prisoner of war camps. One of them was on a previously uninhabited island. It was that small.
Oh dear. I've actually been to the chapel myself in Orkney, as have a few people around here, and you're absolutely right in what you say. It is a symbol of peace and hope. Yes,
it is an extraordinary building. We were very lucky, my wife and I, the first time we went there, we were actually on honeymoon, and we had the building to ourselves, and we put some money in the box at the entrance, and each had the little booklet that gives a very brief history of how the building came into creation. And we were reading these as we walked along the nave and looking at the images, and caught up again at the beautiful rood screen. And I actually had quite a moist eye by this point, but when I looked over at Catherine, tears were streaming down her face, and I thought, well, this is extraordinary. How can a Second World War Nissen hut affect us so much that we are reduced to tears? And that's really what got me started. It just became a passion to track down people who had been in the camps, the descendants of the key artists and the families of the men who ran the camp, both the senior British commander and the senior Italian. And they all had part of the chapel's story, and no one had ever asked them before to tell it.
That's a very strange thing, isn't it, that nobody's actually sat down and gone, well, how did this all come about? What effect did it have on all the people that were involved in this?
Yes, I was very surprised. When I first started researching it, I thought there'd be, a lot on it. The building is actually very well known. I mean, it's known around the world, and it's Orkney's biggest tourist attraction. So what I found a lot of were sort of newspaper and magazine articles that were, by their nature, very brief and just gave the basic facts of when the men arrived and what happened. But no one had, as far as I could find out, tried to track down the various people who had some sort of connection with it or with the camp and working on the barriers. And they were all delighted to tell their part of the story. And it became rather a passion that took me, was about 4 years in the end of all my spare time.
Wow. Did you actually, when you spoke to people that had a connection with the actual chapel, did you actually travel to see them, or was it all telephone conversations and on the internet and stuff?
Well, it was a mixture. I've met up with, I'm still very friendly with one man who's 93, and he was a prisoner of war in the other camp on the island of Bury. But Gino Caprara has a phenomenal memory for the camp life, and he was able to tell me the first day that they arrived in the camp what was on the bed. There were 4 blankets and a knife and spoon. I mean, he had such a helpful, because of his memory. And a lot of it was done via either telephone or emails or letters. But then there were a few people on Orkney, not Italians, but the daughter of the man who owned Lamham during the war. I interviewed her in the nursing home. She was 101.
Wow.
And that was quite delightful. She was a joy to meet. And she remembered the Italians, and she had involvement with them because obviously they were on land owned by her father.
Did any of the Italians after war stay in Orkney, or did they all go home?
No, they were all moved away from Orkney before the end of the war.
Oh, right, okay.
They were there to build the barriers, and really once the barriers were completed, that was their task. And of course, in England, they were desperate for workers, so the men from Camp 60 on Lamham, where the chapel was built, were sent to Skipton, a camp there, and then a few months later, the men from Bury were sent to a camp in Lancashire.
Okay.
And then in 46, as were most of the Italians in Britain, they were repatriated to Italy.
Okay. Is any remnants of the camps still in Orkney? Or have they all gone now?
No, sadly the Bury camp, when that was taken down, that also had a chapel, not as ornate as the one in Camp 60, but that was just taken down. And that's what happened to a lot of the chapels that were built by Italians around the world in POW camps. They were just taken down at the end of the war, or they were left to fall into ruin. And the men, and again, it's one of these amazing stories connected with the Camp 60 chapel. The demolition crew sent to take down Camp 60 refused to touch the chapel. So they actually disobeyed their orders, and they took down all the other huts, they took down the barbed wire, and when everything had gone, the chapel and the statue that the artist Domenico Chiocchetti had built were just left alone on this windswept island.
Wow. I know from personal experience regarding Italian POWs. My family are from a place called Logie, which is in Murray, and at the end of my grandfather's farm road, there was an Italian prisoner of war camp built there, and that's still standing. Well, the majority of that's still standing, and it's used by Murray Estates to store machinery and bits and pieces. I mean, there was a lot of camps about Scotland, weren't there?
There were a lot of prisoner of war camps in Scotland with a lot of Italians in them, and I think that did form a lot of connections between Italians and Scottish people, and also there were camps in England, and quite a few of them did come back.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the men, or the descendants that I interviewed, they met people when they were in the camp, in Skipton in particular, and they then came back from Italy. It was quite difficult for them. In some cases, it took a couple of years just to go through the paperwork.
Yeah.
But they then came back and they lived their lives out in Britain. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got the book, Italian Chapel, The True Story of an Icon. It's taken you quite a while to get together. Is the book out now?
It's out next week.
Out next week, okay.
Paperback by Black and White, a publisher in Edinburgh.
Okay, so it'll be available on Amazon and other sites.
Yeah, any bookshop would order it, yeah.
Okay. Plans for a follow-up?
No, not...
you haven't got another 4 years of your life to spend.
No. I'm going to do some other sort of writing.
Right.
But yes, it's still a passion, and I still get contacted by people. Even in the last few weeks, I've had people contacting me out of the blue because they're trying to find out something about some ancestors who were in Camp 60 or
Right.
whatever. And it still goes on. It's a never-ending, moving story, as one son of a Camp 60 man said to me.
I just wonder how the Italians felt going into Orkney and not a tree in sight.
Yes. It must have been just...
It must have been a heck of an experience.
Absolutely.
I mean, where did all the materials come from for building the camps? Were they all shipped in it before the Italians got there?
Yeah, the camp was built before they arrived.
Yeah, yes.
And the chapel is actually built. It was 2 Nissen huts that were moved to the camp and placed end to end to make a larger hut. Mm-hmm. So they had the basic structure, but apart from cement, they had very little in the way of materials.
Yeah.
They did source some materials, such as the wood for the tabernacle and tiles for the chancel floor. They came from the block ships, which were ships sunk in the channels to try and prevent any German U-boats getting into Scapa Flow, which was home for the British Home Fleet.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they built the Churchill Barrier, wasn't it?
Yes, that was the whole point of it. In 1939, a U-boat did actually penetrate the harbour and sunk the Royal Oak.
That's right, yes.
And Winston Churchill ordered that these eastern entrances between the islands should be sealed permanently, and that was how this all came about.
Yeah, and then, of course, because I've been to St Margaret's Hope in Orkney, and you have to go over the Churchill Barrier to get to that particular part.
Yes.
And I ended up spending a few days in Orkney, and I went to Italian. Everybody said to me, "You got to go see the Italian chapel." And you walk in the door, and I don't know if you and your wife felt the same thing, but you walk in and there's a feeling of warmth, and there's a lot of emotion contained within that building as well.
Huge amount, yes. It's as if the men had put so much of themselves into it that they've really left a part of themselves behind. But what I would say to anyone going is, you've got to try and get in there when there's not a coach load of people in.
Yeah.
So if you visit it and it's really busy, it's worth just waiting quarter of an hour or so until it empties out.
Yes.
And then the atmosphere changes completely.
When the Italians decorated the chapel in the interior, was there a problem with them getting supplies?
They got paints from a shop in Kirkwall, actually, which is still there. Domenico Chiacchetti was the key artist, and he was able to source what he called poster paints from a shop in Kirkwall. The other materials, either came from the block ships. They had a never-ending supply of cement, of course.
Yes.
And so the altar and the altar rail were made of cement. Plasterboard had to be bought in. The men created a fund so that they could actually purchase items that they had to physically buy. They couldn't find them anywhere.
So, therefore, my thinking would be that the people that were in charge of the camp and in charge of Italians, they were very much behind the chapel as well then?
Yeah, they were very lucky with the arrival in the September of 42 of a man called Major Buckland, and he loved everything to do with Italy, and he spoke some Italian. He was really a very important figure in the creation of the chapel. It was down to him that they got the 2 Nissen huts, and he opened doors where he could in order to help the men get the supplies they needed.
So without that major arriving, it could have been a different story altogether?
Yes. It's there's so many things connected to the chapel that it's really survived against the odds.
And still there. And how is it maintained these days?
In 1958 there was the formation of the Italian Chapel Preservation Committee, and that's still going today. There's different people in it, and that consists of local people. It always has a builder who can give advice. There's a local artist who's been involved in restoration work for decades, and they, when is needed, they will call on tradesmen to do whatever is required. Every few years the facade gets a new coat of painting, that sort of thing.
Because, Nissen huts were not known for being the most warm and watertight of buildings.
No, indeed. Nor were they designed to last this long, of course.
No, they weren't, no.
So I think the building has had a few coats of bitumen over the roof.
Yes.
At odd times to maintain the being watertight. And it's had some repairs inside, but it is very much as it was originally. They've had to replace some plasterboard in sections, but what they managed to do is take the painted paper off the plasterboard and then replace the plasterboard and then put back the bits of paper, a bit of a jigsaw. But it is very much as the original work.
How many times have you visited it now then?
Oh, I've lost track. And we go to Orkney every year, and
right.
We'll go to the chapel several times every holiday. So,
yeah. And does it still have the same effect upon you every time you go in?
Yes.
Or do you discover new experiences when you go in?
Yes. It is such a strange building. There were so many stories connected to it, so many human stories. One of the most moving I was involved in was finding out that the blacksmith who built the beautiful rood screen had fallen in love with a local Orkney woman. And I later was able to track down the Palumbi family in Italy, and this story came out. It was only known to a few members of the family. But then we discovered, my wife and I, that he had left a token of his love in the chapel as part of the rood screen.
Wow.
So, yes, lots of moving things connected to it.
Well, listen, Philip, it's been a real joy. Thank you so much for taking this time out to talk to me this morning. And your book, once again, Orkney's Italian Chapel, The True Story of an Icon. And I thank you very much indeed.
Many thanks.
No problem at all. You take care now. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.